all we can do is deal with what we were given.
All right, I'm here with Brian Adams, the Contractor's Contractor. Actually, I love your background. It pops for me. Now, it's funny because I met Brian. Shoot, Brian, I was doing the math, and if my math is correct, it's about 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I flew in from Hawaii for a speech contest, and Brian was one of the presenters in Anaheim.
San Bernardino.
San Bernardino. San Bernardino.
San Bernardino. Actually, it was Ontario, San Bernardino County, but it was Ontario City.
Yeah.
Over at their convention center area. And I remember that whole Toastmaster group. One of the things that they were handing out were these dates, like that fruit. I guess it's a fruit, the date, and because they grow so much of it out there, and it's the first time I'd ever tried one, and I wasn't fond of it. It was almost like putting a big ball of sugar or something in your mouth, and they were like all excited to give it to me and give me like a bag of it, and I was like, oh man. But yeah. Yeah, I remember that very well.
Fast enough, huh?
Yeah, I remember it very well. Yep.
So I walk in. Brian was one of the presenters. I walk into his presentation, and he lit me on fire from the second he started opening his mouth. And he's a master of communication. He is one of my mentors, a speaking mentor, and a great friend. And that's why I really wanted to interview you, Brian. Is you? I'm telling you, I walked in that room, and my whole soul was on fire. I just wanted to get better. I wanted to change. I knew that my life could improve just from the things that you talked about. And one of the main things you said that really stuck with me was, what do you want? For the love of all that's good and holy, what do you want? And then I bought all your stuff. I bought your dream board, and I bought your CDs. I brought it all home. I listened to it over and over and over again. But Brian, tell us a little bit about how you got started and kind of your background, even where you grew up and how you became the Contractor's Contractor.
Yeah, before I do that, let me just because that presentation that you were there, I think I gave that. Maybe I gave it 3 times, but I know for sure I gave it twice. Once when you were there, and then I did it on one of my live broadcasts, the teleseminars that I used to do. But the whole idea was re-energize your dreams. And it was like, because it was so, I was crazy, even still, I'm passionate about it, but, and even more so now, because a lot of that was based around the way we take care of our cell phones. And 17 years ago, the cell phone wasn't what it is now. Now it's like probably the main thing in your life. So we really even, use it more. But, it's like, man, you got that, even back then you had that cell phone with you, and it was a little flip up thing. You did a little bit of texting. There was none of this freaking internet and everything else that was on it. It was just, it was just starting to become a real major part of your life, but still everybody held on to it like it was everything. And I'm like, dude, you should be holding on to your dreams like that and recharging your dreams every day. I mean, you're carrying that thing with you. You jump in the car. You don't even put your seatbelt on, man. You're looking for the charger. Where's the phone charger? Got to keep this thing charged up. Got to keep it charged up. And you get it plugged in, and then you put your seatbelt on, and you're doing whatever you're doing. You get out of the car. You're taking it with you, man. You got to take it with you. Take it with you. And you back in the car, recharge it. Get home. Where's the plug, honey? Hey, let me borrow your plug. They got plugs at every 7-Eleven and every gas station because people got to keep it charged. Keep it charged. You get home, you don't go to bed until you make sure it's plugged in. I'm like, dude, treat your freaking dreams like that. Damn, when you get in the car, remind yourself of your dreams. Put in that CD, that cassette tape, Audible now, I mean, whatever it is, listen to stuff that reminds you of that dream, man. Keep that dream, you getting out of the car, man, you going into the bookstore, don't go into looking for this and that. It's like, man, before you go to bed, don't be plugging in your dream. You remind yourself of your dream, go back over it, go over your notes, wake up, make sure it's fully charged, make sure your dream is fully, man, even if it's just as half, put half of that energy into your dream that you're putting into that freaking cell phone that you think is so important. But that's what that talk was about 17 years ago, and it still gets me today because I see people doing it. But yeah, so I don't know, let's take you back to when I was probably 9 years old growing up in North Carolina. I grew up in the projects. My dad was never around. My mom, she had 5 kids, and so we grew up in the projects was the apartments that the government paid for. So every Sunday, I had 2 brothers, 2 sisters. Every Sunday morning, I would get dressed up in whatever clothes I thought was my best clothes, because back then you used to get dressed up to go to church. Now you just go if you go. And there was a church bus that came through the projects, and it would pick you up and take you. And I made sure I was out on the sidewalk waiting for that church bus. And in the afternoon, when they dropped you off, they'd give you a candy bar. And I didn't go, I wasn't out there standing on the sidewalk waiting for that church bus because I was so into religion at 9 years old. I was on that church bus because I knew if I got on that church bus Sunday morning, I didn't have to be at home when the drunks woke up. Just plain and simple. It was a way out for me. My mom was a very abusive alcoholic. Our house was the party house, and that was a Sunday morning way out. Saturday night was a disaster. And so if I was on that sidewalk waiting for that bus, I wouldn't be there. And when they dropped you off, they gave you a candy bar. So that wasn't bad either. Probably the only candy bar I got all week long. But 9 years old, I remember stepping off the bus. And for whatever reason, the bus driver was like, "Hey, Brian." And I turn around and look at him, and I'm holding on to my candy bar. I'm not giving that back. He's like, "What are you gonna do when you grow up?" And I'm like, man, I'm looking at him. I'm looking at the apartment I'm getting ready to go into. I'm 9 years old. I'm 55 right now. I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do when I grow up. So I know I didn't know at 9, but I'm looking at him. I'm looking at the apartment. I looked back at him. And I said, "And I don't have a clue what I'm gonna do when I grow up, but I know exactly what I'm not gonna do." And he nodded his head like a half of a smile and pulled that little thing and shut the door and drove away. And I knew I was like, I kind of feel like that was the first seed really planted to where, God, the universe, whatever was telling me that what's in that apartment is not you. There's more. And I even tell people now, when we're talking about you, like we just said, you're working on your dreams and your goals and all that stuff, and what do you want out of life, and that's a big question. And so I almost start in the same way I started at 9 years old. And my wife, made me do that teaching martial arts over the years, I would tell people, "Come on, man, we got to have these dreams. We got to have these goals. Let's write them down. I'm going to help you achieve more than just this dojo. Getting your belt, that ain't nothing. I want you to achieve outside this dojo." And she's like, "I'm beating people up, make them come up with dreams that they probably didn't even want." My wife's like, "You got to stop that shit. You didn't do that." She says, "So what are you talking about?" She goes, "Like you tell that story when you were 9, you didn't know. And, but you knew what you were not going to do." And I tell people, it's like, so if you do know what you're going to do, that's great. You're way ahead. We start mapping things out on how to get there.
Yeah.
But if you're not sure and you're kind of on the fence about it, a great place to start is like, what do you not want? I knew I wasn't going to be no alcoholic. I knew my kids were not going to grow up in a home without a dad. I knew I wasn't going to be on welfare. I mean, at 9 years old, I knew that. I knew those things. So from there on, I knew what actions to take and not to take. Even at 9, like 11. So I'm 11 years old, and my brothers are probably 14 and 16 or 15 and 16. But, back then, the early 70s, they're getting into marijuana and stuff and and I'm like, not even a little bit for me. And so, just growing up like that, seeing what drugs did to them, I knew where it led. I knew I didn't have to do it. I already knew what alcohol did. And then right now, my favorite music is country music. And, crazy. It's all stories. And I love it. And within a 2-minute or 4-minute song, it can take you somewhere. But for God, I don't know, probably 30 years, I hated country music because of the trigger and the emotional place it sent me to, because all the drunks at my house would that's what they would listen to. So I couldn't even listen to it because of what it did to me physically. And so I had to, overcome that and realize what's going on in my body and in my brain. But I watched all of that stuff. And so, I was able to leave North Carolina, came out to California, made some changes. So I was kind of like, I tell people, like, I have friends or students would come in and the parents would say, "Hey man, you need to talk to David. He's not doing so good in school." And I'm like, "Shit, you the parent, you need to talk to him. What am I going to do?" And so I said, but I will, whatever. And even adults would, say, "Hey man, what the hell's going on? This or that." And they say, "Oh man," they give me these sob stories. And I'm like, "Dude, you came to the wrong place." You can tell that shit to people who don't know, but wherever you've been, I was there worse. You don't get to come here and have a pity party. No, nobody's joining. Those are stories you're telling yourself for the bad actions that you're taking on a daily basis. What? I'm like, yeah, man, you came to the wrong place looking for sympathy. You're not going to get any of it here. So it started from the martial arts training that I was given. I was like, bullshit. You guys started off like, and I kind of laid back from it. So I said, man, maybe, I said, if you grew up in a average house or decent house, and maybe the mom and dad didn't drink, maybe you went to church as a family unit and stuff. So now you're out here experimenting with shit that you didn't know. I said, but there's enough education that you've got to have that destination. It's like, you've got to have, all right, so you don't know where you're going. Let's back up. Like I said, what do you not want? And here's where alcohol and drugs and abusing those things, here's where they're going to take you. We know that. We see the patterns. Mm-hmm. So it's up to you. And nothing in your life will ever the only thing that makes a difference in your life is the actions you take. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. You don't get overweight by not eating. I mean, so it's the action of picking that fork up and putting something in your mouth. That's the energy. That's the action. So there's no way. It's not happening. It's the action that you're taking. And, I've got the 2 brothers and 2 sisters. At 22 years old, my brother was knocked in the head, thrown in a river, and pulled out 8 days later and buried as a John Doe. We found him like a year and a half later, which really just devastated my mom. And my oldest brother he just became institutionalized, just from prison to prison and out. And, even now at this point at 60 years old, lives homeless in Salt Lake City, just for whatever reason, just, never makes the break away from it. My older sister, who is still younger than my 2 brothers, at the age of 5, I was 5, she was 7. My little sister was probably 3.5, almost 4, because I'm like a year older than her. But all of us, all 5 kids, my mom and one of her friends, and we're in the car driving, 60 miles to go get more alcohol. Because back then in North Carolina, you had to buy it from the ABC store, Alcohol Beverage Control, which was no control at all. They just, they were making all the money and not sharing it. Right. But they drove over there completely drunk on the way home, hit the railroad tracks, flew a couple of times in the air, landed, and for whatever reason, we all should have died. No one got hurt except for my sister, who at the age of 7 was supposed to have died. Didn't look like she was going to live, but she would always be a vegetable. So it went from she was going to be a vegetable, never talk, never do anything, to where she finally started talking. It was probably a 2 or 3 year process. But now, even at 57 that she is, and she's been, before she even, at the age of 15 and 16, she was back to, you really had to look at her to tell that something was wrong. She used to be right-handed. She's now left-handed because the left side of her brain is complete dead. It's just gray matter, nothing there. So left side of your brain controls the right side functions. She was right-handed, now she's left-handed. She walks with just a slight limp, but you really can't tell it. So even when I hit 20, 21, I'm doing the martial arts thing. I'm teaching everybody. My little sister, who I thought seen everything that I saw, so I thought, man, she's going to be even better than me. She was there, she's seen what alcohol and drugs does. And she turned out to be more of a gangster than all of them combined. Oh, no. It's crazy. It's like, she's like Bonnie and Clyde without Bonnie, or without Clyde. And just, I was like, damn, Rhonda, what the hell? And I looked back, and so I'm doing all this research, and just, I'm reading every book, listening to every book on the brain, and how do we form habits and break habits, and what makes us addicted to certain things, and chemicals in the brain, and the hypothalamus, and all of this. I'm diving in as deep as I can. I'm going to seminars where I'm this 17 kid that dropped out of school in the 10th grade and got no education, and there's PhDs and all these like 2 and 3 PhD doctors, and they're all there, and I'm like taking my own notes, going, all right, okay, that kind of makes sense. Let me figure this out. I don't have the education, but I'm smart enough to where I can back it out and figure out how it works, and so I wanted to know what made me different than my brothers and sisters, so I could share with other people, because people consistently asked me, well, why didn't you go to drugs and alcohol? and I didn't have an answer, and I wanted to have an answer. And it always comes down to choices, but so I started, and then with my learning everything about the brain and this, and I would hear some things, and I was like, well, that ain't true. Nope, that's not true. And from like these doctors with PhDs, and I'm like, no. And they're like, what the hell you mean no? And I'm like, well, look at my sister. The whole left side of her brain is dead, complete gray matter. Is like, so she's got literally half a brain, and you can't tell anything. So somehow the body compensates everything. It's just this miracle. You're a walking miracle, and we take it for granted. So through all of those years, I ended up putting together I'm teaching these guys self-defense, and I'm realizing outside of the dojo, they're blowing it. Their life is sucking. No matter how much I try to bring them in and tell them, it's like, so instead of teaching them physical self-defense, I got to start incorporating this mental self-defense. And I put together a program and wrote some stuff on, we called it mental martial arts. Defend yourself against your toughest opponent, you. And from there branched out. And through the whole time I had been doing construction, I was able to, when I moved out to California, got a job at 17 at McDonald's, yay McDonald's, like Jim Rohn says. Have an attitude, you go from $4 to $5. Put on that hat, give them a smile. But a buddy of mine was, pulled me and seeing the potential in me, going, man, what the hell are you doing here? He says, you either got to go back to school or learn a trade where you can support yourself. And I'm like, dude, I ain't going back to school. That didn't work the first time. And so I got into construction and liked it because it was the first thing that made me feel good about myself. At the end of the day, you were sweating, you had sawdust on you, but you were able to look and say, shit, I accomplished something. I did that, man, look at that. So that made you feel good. And then the pay was good. And, the scheduling worked out. I was able to, get to the karate studio, from like 3 o'clock till whenever I left at 11 o'clock, back up at 4 and back to work. So I mastered the trade, and then, eventually, got into my own business, didn't have a clue about business, had to do the same thing like everything else, had to get self-taught. And fortunately I was, and, working for a gentleman, I had already had my own, I was self-employed, and I hate that term. But I was self-employed for a couple of years and just working 70, 80 hours a week, thinking I was the guy, saying I'm making all these sacrifices for my loved ones. Right. A lot of people say that. And in reality, it's our loved ones that end up being sacrificed. You're never spending time with them. You're not home. And again, that went back to the age of 9 years old of what kind of dad I knew I wanted to be even then. And through the 70s, maybe the late 70s, but there was a song, Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know, but soon. And that song had touched me way, even as a kid. I was like, man, that's never going to be me. If I ever get kids, they're not going to be asking me, when you're coming home, Dad. And, shit, here I am, working with my hands, making money, supporting these guys, thinking I'm the, but they're like, hey, when you coming home, can we do anything? Are we doing something this weekend? No, I'm working. It's like, and got lucky enough to work for a gentleman who owned several companies, and I'm working at his house, and I'm like, dude, when you go to work? And he said, I'm working now. I was like, what are you talking about? I said, don't you have to be there? And he's like, Brian, if I have to be there, it's not a business, it's a job. I'm like, the hell, what are you talking? You're confusing me, man. What are you saying right now? I said, because if I'm not here, it ain't getting done. He laughs at me, he goes, and it never will. I'm like, what? I said, what are you talking about? He said, do you really want to know, or are you just, making conversation? I'm like, dude, trust me, I want to know. I want to know more than anybody you've ever met. I want to know. And he believed me and set me down. And he goes, well, here's the difference. You're self-employed. You need to be a business owner. And even then, I'm like, dude, more confusion. I'm self-employed. Everybody loves to say I'm self-employed. It's like, yeah, you're an employee. You're always going to be an employee. You didn't start a business to be an employee. You could have stayed working for the other guy if you wanted to be an employee. And I'm like, shit, that kind of makes sense. Keep going. So I was able to work with him for a while. But he gave me, the books to read. And I really couldn't read, so I buy the cassette tapes and listen to them. Automobile University, as Zig Ziglar calls it. And I refused to listen to the negative news when I could educate myself. And again, I was blessed to quit school in the 10th grade, didn't make it to the 10th grade. So I was uneducated enough, dumb enough to know that I needed an education. I knew I didn't, because the problem with most people in life, and my buddy and friend mentor Les Brown says, the problem is most people don't know what they don't know, but they think they know. And I'm like, shit, say that again. The problem with most people is they don't know what they don't know, yet they think they know. And that was, and it was kind of me, but I wasn't there. I knew I didn't know.
Yo,
I was
Brian,
like,
that is so funny because you're absolutely correct. And a lot of times you bring all of that knowledge to a group of folks that think they know it all, but they don't know any of it.
They don't know.
And they don't want to hear it because they know it all.
They know.
So it's so difficult sometimes for leaders of any size organization to get their point across, to really capture the heart and minds of the people that they're serving or trying to serve, because of that very aspect right there. They think they know it all because they don't know what they don't know. And they don't because they think they know it. They're not listening to anybody. Hey man, Brian, you know what? We have come to the end of our 1 hour session here. It has been an absolute pleasure. I know that everybody on here that watches this is going to fall in love with Brian Adams. So if at any time you want